Welcome back to our project. Previously, we built a new Brownie project from scratch. We built a smart contract. We built a script to deploy the contract and interact with the contract by doing transactions. We automated smart contract deployment testing and automated transaction testing. In this lecture, we're beginning our look at the Brownie console. We're going to learn how we can use the Brownie console to deploy a smart contract. So to open the Brownie console, you can go to your project folder and use the command Brownie console. This is going to open a console that's connected to a development chain provided by Ganache. So it's connected to a local blockchain. You should see these three alligator brackets or greater than signs, which means that we're now not in our computer's operating system console. We're now in the Truffle console. Let's take a look at what you can do with the Truffle console. One function that you can call is the dir function for directory. Here you can check out some values that are available to you, such as contract, as well as ETH address, as well as fixed. And GUI hello world, that is a contract that we built because we're inside of our project folder. You can also see way or denominations of Ether. You can see the accounts that you have, for example. So these are pre-funded accounts that are available to use on this local blockchain with Ether. We have more values like history. We have exit to close the console. We have network, so we can check what network we're at. You can see we're at the network Brownie network. And quit project, we can inspect what project we're in with the command project. And we can also see other properties. For example, Web3 is another object available to us. As well, you can call the help function. This is Python 3.8's help utility. So if you need help with Python, then you can use help, right? And if you want to go back to the Truffle console, well, you can check if we can still access it. So now we're actually in the Python console. So to go back to Truffle, I'm just going to hit Control C. With Control C, you leave the Python interpreter and you go back to the Truffle console. To leave the Truffle console, you can call exit, okay, the function, or you can use Control D, and then to go back, you can just call Brownie console again. Let's take a look at an example of doing a transaction. For example, transferring ETH. So we can call first our history to check what we've done previously. We've done nothing previously. Then let's take our first account, our account at index 0. So let's take that account, and you can use the up and down arrow keys to go back and forth with commands. And let's call the transfer function to transfer ETH or denominations of ETH. We're going to transfer to accounts at index 1. So we're transferring from account 0 to account 1. We're going to transfer 1 Ether. We have to pass in the keyword Ether here because otherwise it will transfer way, which is the smallest unit or smallest fraction of Ether. So you should get this message after you hit enter that says transaction sent with the transaction address, the gas price, the gas limit, the nonce number, transaction confirmed, and the transaction again hash. So here we've done a transaction. So if we check our history now, we can see the transaction is actually listed in our history because Ganache mined the transaction immediately and the results were outputted. Next, what about deploying a contract with the console? Well, we can inspect again our hello world contract, and note that if you want to access autofill, you can just use the tab key on your keyboard. We can check the type of this contract with type of hello world. We can see that it's a contract container from Brownie. To deploy this, we can call hello world.deploy. And this will result in the hello world constructor. If you check your history though, you'll notice that the transaction didn't actually add, because for the deployment, this is just checking the property. To actually do the deployment, you have to call hello world.deploy as a function, and you have to specify the from address. So you have to pass in the address from where you are deploying. So we're going to call hello world.deploy, and then you have to pass in this object where you pass in from which account you're doing the deployment, such as from accounts at index 1, which means we're going to deploy the contract from the account with index 1. Then we can hit enter, and now the transaction will be performed. So if you check your history, now you have 2 transactions. Right? So in that case, the transaction was performed. So now if we actually access Hello World, we don't get an empty list, we actually get a Hello World contract in the list. And if we did the deployment again, then Hello World now has 2 contracts. So every time you call hello world.deploy, it adds a new contract instance to your list that are available. And you can access elements from the list. For example, you can access hello world at index 0 to get the first element in the list. If you try to access one that doesn't exist, then it will give you the message list index out of range, because we don't have any contract at index 2. We only have contracts at index 0 and index 1 right now. All public contract methods are available from the object via the name of the method. For example, we can access our hello world at index 0, and we can access the function getNumber. And we also have autofill options. So in this case, we're just checking that the function exists. We're not actually calling the function. To do that, you'd have to pass in the parentheses. And you can check if a contract exists that doesn't exist, and then you'll get this error message if there's no such attribute. Let's try another function like change number. We can check that it exists. So this one does exist. You can try calling it, but notice that you have to pass in the arguments that it requires. For example, in this case, we have to pass in a uint 256, and then we can perform the transaction to change the number. Then we can get the number again, and notice that it has been changed to 444. To change a state in the contract, you have to perform the transaction, which will return a transaction receipt. And you can include transaction parameters, such as the address from which you want to perform the transaction. So I could call my function change number, and I could add in here my account from which I'm sending, such as accounts at index 2. So that's optional. Otherwise, the default account is the account that deployed the contract. So you don't have to pass in the account from which to send for transactions. You do have to for deployment. All right, so that is how we can test out deploying a contract, and also we can test out interacting with the contract, calling some transactions for the contract. Coming up next, we're going to learn how we can run scripts in the Brownie console. So we're going to build scripts, which we already have a script called deploy. We can build another one as well, and we can test out using the Brownie console to run those automated Python scripts. If you liked this video, then go to training.mammoethinteractive.com. We have tons more content on blockchain, web development, machine learning, and much more. We also have a membership for just $19 a month where you can get access to our 372 course bundle and counting.